Round of applause and come on the stage. I'm going to take a step through the computer.
Mikä kertaa näin?
Niin näin.
Right, well, thank you very much indeed. It's very, very lovely to be here. When I just came through the door, I asked when was President Trump speaking. And the guy said, he's cancelled. It's off. And it's terrible. I said, well, why? And he said, well, the rumour is that Trump said that the stage wasn't big enough for him and Charlie Ward. So one of them had to give ground, and it wasn't going to be Charlie. Now, those of you who've been very kind and attended anything that I've spoken at, you know that I tend to give away presents when I can. Did anybody come today who had been given one of the tickets from last May? One person, all right. So please see me afterwards, because what I did was I wrote out on the tickets money, prizes, and I was buying these novelty Zim notes back. They're just novelty. And anyone who gave an answer that I liked, I did that. So well done for making it up and answering that. Right now, I've only got 40 odd minutes. You know that I normally go on for 2 hours, so we've got to be really quick. I'm going to try and mix a bit of intel with something that's perhaps educational. So off we go. Well, we did not come here to be paid slaves. That's a very emotive and difficult topic. But that's exactly what happened. But we didn't realise it. So if we were to stand outside a supermarket and ask people, are you a slave? They would be affronted. Of course not. Of course I'm not a slave. This is what we think of slavery. This actually is in a drawing from Cuba. That's the perception of slaves, and it's quite right, of course. And we imagine them being taken and cutting, in this case it's sugar beet. Nobody's been paid anything here. And then maybe if it's cotton, carrying it back to the storage place. And that is our perception of slavery, and we believe we've moved away from that. So what's a paid slave? A paid slave is all of us who work long hours, don't receive very much money. Perhaps our birth certificates are sold before we even know what's happening, so that we're valued. So a person who is born in Mayfair with a Mayfair London postcode is going to be worth a lot more than somebody in Birmingham. Not spiritually, but financially. So all of this has been done behind the scenes. Very clever. Don't take that away from them. It's been very cleverly done. Really, although we could go right back to Sumerian times, I want to try and keep it focused. And this, of course, is the Industrial Revolution. I just want to ask Becky, could you pop up to the green room and just, or ask someone to get the bag, my carrier bag with all the bits in. Thank you. When we think about the Industrial Revolution, we think about very wealthy people. We think about a small group of individuals who basically ran the show, not as politicians, but as industrialists. And this is a genuine photograph of somebody who was a factory owner. That's the costume. It's the tall stovepipe hat, the stick, and that is the guise of all the individuals in Birmingham, Coventry, where the Industrial Revolution really took hold. And that's how you'd recognise them. So we are in Birmingham, and of course I'm going to try and put that on. This is a coin token, and we want to talk a little bit about paid slaves. As times changed, individuals who worked in a factory weren't paid money, they were paid tokens. And this is a Birmingham City Council, or whatever the council was then, token. And it shows a 12-year-old boy, and it says industry will have its sure reward. And so when you worked, you were paid in a token. But you couldn't go out to the shops and use the token. You had to go to the guy who owned the factory, and only in his shop could you redeem your token. So if you were paid £1, that could only be spent in the guy's shop. And yet people accepted it. Now I have got one of these to give away, and it'll be our first prize or present of the time. And here it is. And it's just coming through now, so we just get the bag up here and I can have a good old run through. It seems so strange to us to imagine children working, and we're not even talking about, 1,000 years ago, thank you. We are talking literally about just 200 years ago, when it was quite commonplace for children to do a job. Generally speaking, had no parents, or they did, the parents were very poor, and then the parents were bribed or paid money, and the child was taken and put into the factory work. So, this is going to be put on YouTube and go around the world, so I do want to try and bring our American cousins in. This is literally in the United States, and these are guys that work, young children who work in the factory. So don't just think it's Britain. This happened in the English-speaking world, and it's absolutely shocking to imagine that. We're all familiar with children working down the mines, but what other industry can anybody think of where children were worked? We talked about the mines. What other one? Hand up. Say? Cotton mills. Right. Okay, so just hold on to that, because that's very good. This is a posed picture, but it's true, and it shows you exactly what would happen. It was perfectly normal from the system of the law to send young children as 5 years old up and down chimneys to clean them. And of course what happened is cancer of the lungs just didn't grow. It was absolutely awful. And yet all the elite, the politicians, considered this perfectly normal because it was business. It was the Industrial Revolution. It was coal, and that's what powered this country. Birmingham, very big player in that. Here's another one. Bryant and May, I'm sure they're not very proud of pictures like this because these young children died from the sulphur of the matches, which ate away their throats. So you would always tell one of these children because they would be yellow under the chin. So not a very pleasant picture. Cotton. So basically in Britain it seemed to be quite okay for children to go down and pick hops or apples or what have you. And here with young children, I can assure you they're not being paid. I'll remind you of that picture, and I'll show you that picture. So slavery was adamantly strong, but hidden under the guise of, oh, well, it's fun, or it's good, it's take these kids out of the slums and they can go and do this, that and the other. Cotton, right, would you like to come up and get your prize? Because you said cotton. Come on, come on. So the whole principle of the QFS, because we are going to talk about that very soonish, I suppose, is that we have to think about service to others. And I've never raffled anything really, I've always given things away. So as the QFS is about asset backing the currency, I've got these Britannia silver coins, I don't know, £17, £20 each. And as you get the question right, you're going to get your present, and I'm going to give you one of those as well. Because we've got to show that money has no control over us. We have to show that it's not our God. It's really important. The horrible point about this picture is the young boy's got no shoes on and is operating cotton. And to show you double standards, why is it all right for the man to wear shoes, but for the children not to wear shoes? So they knew it was wrong, but it was acceptable. Cotton was one of the biggest exporters in this country of all time. Who can tell me where that is for a prize? Not Blackpool. No.
Yorkshire.
Birmingham. Where is it in Birmingham? What is it? Nobody's going to win a prize. No, it's the workhouse in Birmingham. And you would have won a Birmingham coin, maybe later. So just to show you that Birmingham had its workhouse. Now this is interesting because it's one of the first places that actually paid in tokens, but then you could redeem it for real, I call it real money. So this is a sixpence, and you worked in the workhouse, and then at the end of the time you would take it to the shop, but you would get real money. So they were the first ones to do that because others weren't, exchanging it for the currency at the time. Who can tell me who that is? The guy who, where are you? Come on, come up here. You're right. Come on, please. Okay, this is the Cadbury factory. Now, what's interesting, there have been a lot of philanthropists, but Cadbury was actually, because of the Quaker, he had a very different take on what industry was about. So if you notice, the factory's got lots of trees. It's very environmentally friendly, and that was very important. Who knows where that is? Oh, everybody shouted. You got it right. Come on. Yeah, come on. Got a birthday today. Who's got a birthday? Right. Well, as it's literally talking about Cadbury, here's Cadbury's happy birthday. Laid it out in a way that he thought brought some respect to his workers. So did away with the slums. Unfortunately, it didn't catch on because it was very expensive. And if you were a landlord, it was much more profitable to have 30, 40 slums and get all the money in on that than it was to have something like that. So that was never going to take off under the system that we had then and we still have now. If I show you this picture, not to you guys because you're all awake and aware, but most people would say, oh, what a lovely picture. It's happy, it's safe. It's a middle-class child holding her cat, walking down, obviously, a middle-class stairs. If I showed this to people, they wouldn't know how to express themselves. They couldn't say, oh, that's a lovely picture. What's the connection, what's similarity between this child and this child? Who can tell me? With a cat? Yeah, it's too easy. Is it that one? That one is in a bedroom attire, so it doesn't need shoes, and the other one just doesn't own a pair of shoes. But if I ask people which child loved her cat more, that would be an interesting question, wouldn't it? So this is John Wilkinson. He's the famous Wilkinson sword, and of course he paid in tokens. They all did. It was all pretty normal. Right, I'm just watching the time. I'm going to fly on. Battle of Waterloo, 1815. What happened in 1816? That's actually right. And in 1816, something else happened. 1816, income tax was repealed. Income tax had been brought on because of Bonaparte, apparently fighting Napoleon Bonaparte. And 1816, the war was over, or seemed to be over, and the public had enough of income tax, so they actually did away with it. There was no more income tax. So here's an employer, an employee, those of you who are fortunate enough to have jobs, and I'm being absolutely honest and straight with you, those of you who are fortunate enough to have jobs, you make a contractual arrangement with your employer. He or she says, you'll do this job, these number of hours, and this is what I'll pay you. So who gives someone else the right to come in and take that money from you? You don't have an arrangement with the government. You didn't say to the government, I'll work for this person, and I will give you 25% of my wages, although I don't do any work for you. And yet we accept it. Everyone accepts it. It's the only game in town. It's absolutely disgusting.
Not everyone.
Well, no. Some of us would be central. So we have a nice American picture here. I couldn't find anything that was English or British against the taxman when I looked. It was all coming from the United States. So it just says basically that theft is someone who robs you, but when they're in an official guise, that's called taxation. And taxation is theft. Now, I know what people will say. How do we get the roads repaired if we don't pay tax? How do we have enough police officers, hospitals, school teachers? Who's going to pay the person to put a ticket on your car when you park on a double yellow line? Who's going to pay the person when you overstay in the car park? Who's going to enforce the 3-point penalty when you drive 31 miles an hour in a 30 zone? Who's going to pay for all that? Well, this is what it feels like at the moment. All of the agencies of the government shouting at you, us, we, to row harder, because they want more and more out of us, and yet we don't get rewarded. What we want to move to is this. That's what we want to move to. Slim down government. If we pay 0 income tax, we can have a government that's 75, 80, 85, 90% smaller than it is now. Imagine with the Q phone or the Tesla phone, where you're no longer voting for a politician or a party. Imagine you have as an offer of a new bridge to be built. So anyone within a 25-mile radius of this bridge is allowed to vote because it's a local thing. And you don't vote Conservative, Labour or Liberal. You don't vote for any named person. You are voting for an initiative. Do you like this initiative? So you go on your Q phone or your T phone and you vote yes or no. If it's a wider range, if it's national or international, then more and more people will be allowed to vote. Because if there's no politicians in the true sense of the word, and remember I was a politician, then there's nobody saying, I've got my party telling me what to do, or I've got to do this or that. You just respond to the people. So think of a very small government at the top in the United Kingdom, and a small civil service, and their job is to give the people what they want, not what they're being told to give them. That's very important. If the QFS is the new Robin Hood, that doesn't look like Robin Hood, does it? Anybody here from Nottingham? Nottingham, come on. Got one person from Nottingham, thank goodness. All right, come on. So, we always think of Nottingham, the Sheriff of Nottingham. So, there, that's Robin Hood. That's the guy. So if the QFS is Robin Hood, then who's that man? Sheriff of Nottingham. We even know the Sheriff of Nottingham. No, don't get a prize for that, it's too easy. So if that's the Sheriff of Nottingham, that must be the Sheriff of Nottingham. Do you remember those adverts where we were made to feel all nice and happy because he's a cartoon character? and it's nice to give money. So again, from the United States of America, they don't have that. They have the Inland Revenue Service, and we are told that that is an eagle holding the scales of justice, so they are justly robbing you. That actually is a vulture, ladies and gentlemen, picking over the carcass of what we have left after we've paid our gas bill and our electricity bill and all the rest of it.
Was the one before Jim Harrow?
Pension. This is the problem. This is what's running out. The cabal have done a fantastic job, as always, using the mainstream media to promote the fact that your pension is there and it'll be fine. We know it's not fine and the money's not there. What the cabal are doing is literally scraping the last of their fiat money to pay people who keep them in power. And I'm not being disrespectful to ex-police officers, but I'm being disrespectful to the system. So ex-police officers will always get their pension while there's money in the barrel, because these are the very people they want. But that's going to run out very soon. So the people who thought they were upholding the system will actually find they've been kicked in the teeth very soon. Right, so we talk about gas. We're going to go on to the Intel side. I'm going to have to really be quick now. We talk about the natural gas, but we don't really talk about the oil. And when you look at it, you can actually begin to understand why certain countries are not willing to sanction Russia. Now, what's not understood by the general public is that before all this kicked off, Hungary was approached, and the guy in Hungary was asked, will you veto everything? So we're going to actually bring all these sanctions against Russia, but will you veto it? Because it looks good for the public. So the BBC says, hold these sanctions, and then the Hungarian Prime Minister says, well, actually, I'm not having any of that. But it looks good for the BBC to say that's what's happening. So the Hungarian guy is vetoing the lot of it. So there's no sanctions. There's sanctions against individual oligarchs, but there's no real sanctions against the Russian economy. We'll talk about gold backing in a minute. Right, I want to quickly talk about this because it's very important, and it's why Putin went into Russia, went into Ukraine. Anybody who studied, lived through Nazi attack in Russia, 1941, will know that the Russians have an absolute hatred for Nazism. That is, can anybody tell me? Right, so it's a swastika turned on its side with the two ends missing, you're absolutely right. That is their flag for the Azov Battalion. Some people call it a regiment. It was never quite that big. The Azov Battalion. Right, this map, somebody sent it to me. I asked for it because I had given back. I don't have a BBC license, so I don't look at BBC. People send things to me, and this is Azovstal, the steel plant, and Mariupol. And the BBC shows how it's been surrounded over the period of time and the fight that's taken place. Familiar? That's Stalingrad. Very, very familiar. This is really what's going on. It's not about Kiev. It wasn't about anything except Chernobyl, some of the biological sites in Ukraine which have been taken out by cruise missile or hypersonic missile. But it was really about Azovstal because of all the tunnels that were constructed. We're very familiar with that. Hitler Youth with their flags. Just take attention of the flag on the side, which isn't too different from Azovstal's flag. Here they are. They do like their flags, and we can see that nobody can get away from this because that is the SS rune, the Schutzstaffeln, and nobody can say they're not fascist because that is literally what that is. Here we are, boys being indoctrinated, exactly what you would expect, and it's more serious because when we come to the fanatics, here we see that they're slightly older kids. So this is the problem facing, or was the problem facing Putin, that he had these people right on his doorstep. And they love their nighttime parades, out they go. Friends and family are always welcome, and they come along. We know this is what it is because the guy on the left has got an armband on his arm, and he's got his face covered. So they love it. They like it as well. There's the Brandenburg Gate, and so we know that the Azovstal is just literally modelling on it. Very famous, the steelworks, after it's been bombed. and Avostal Steelworks more. Where might that be? It's not Auschwitz, no. I don't think I'd have the strength to bring that to you today. What might that be? That is Avostal Steelworks. That is... No. It's a tractor factory in Stalingrad, 1942. This is absolutely playing out in history. All of that pretense around Kiev, and the BBC apparently showed pictures of tanks just idling. Putin told them, just don't move, stay there. The real battle was taking place here. You heard about the United States general that was captured from NATO. Did you hear 4 days ago the Canadian general was captured? Good. He was actually put in by Hunter Biden to oversee biological labs 1 to 5. And he was trying to get out. He tried multiple times to get out of there. That is why the West kept demanding a safe passage for refugees, put buses on green routes. They don't care about people. They wanted this guy out. Multiple times he tried to get through, failed, and he was caught on a bus, disguised. That guy is now in Moscow and will face, court. So we have a situation where the general public believe that the war is the war for the Ukraine. No, it's not. Putin had the guts to do what the West couldn't do. He took out a uranium spinning factory under Chernobyl. They were spinning uranium. What happened was that Putin's spy satellites detected a heat signature under there. He sent it to the Pentagon. They said, we agree with you. Someone is spinning uranium. That's very clever because the soil, the ground is contaminated with uranium. So you would expect this heat signature, but it was too much for something that happened all those years ago. So that's why paratroopers went into Chernobyl. He didn't hit it with cruise missiles. He had to capture it intact. And what a surprise, there were Ukrainian scientists there supposedly monitoring it. So that was that. We know Avostal had some terrible things going on under it. It was their headquarters, and that's been blown to bits, bombed to bits. I actually think that the war will be over very soon now. So I'm going to have to wrap up. I'm very sorry that I couldn't have more time. Anybody from Coventry here? Yes. Oh, thank you. Do you want me to? Yeah. All right. The importance about where we are now in our time is that we're all tired. Let's not lie. Let's not be full of bravado. Lots of Americans eating popcorn and having bravado. We don't do that in this country very easily. We're effing well fed up with it. And we need a change. We know, thank you. We know what that change is. We know in our hearts what needs to happen. And like you, I, and those around me, have members of our family and friends who basically think we're insane. But let's look back over the last few weeks. Enough information has sneaked its way into mainstream, and I promise you much more is coming. But enough has come to begin to make these people, maybe they're not going to say to you or me, you were right, but they are now beginning to doubt themselves. A number of people that had the shots but never went back for the booster is staggering, because enough information has been given out. We are fighting a war, and unlike Avostal or Stalingrad before it, the bombs and bullets are not flying, but it is a war because it's a spiritual war of energy. For some reason, all of you broke out of the matrix. You saw the truth, and you were prepared to stand by it, even when close friends called you out. Because how can you convince somebody of what we know to be right when they're brainwashed? You cannot. It has to happen from them. And I've always said to CC members, step away. If somebody doesn't want to engage with you on an open basis, and they just want to shout at you, Don't waste your time and energy. Spend it educating people who are on the verge of waking up. This movement, CC, and I know a lot of you are CC members here, and I thank you for coming, and I thank all the coordinators who have come today, and all those who haven't been able to make it and do fantastic work right across the earth. We're very, very proud of you. We created it so that people could communicate, could actually share information, could be strong, and help us to push back. But what we never expected was governments to come in and mandate laws. It was never about COVID, it was always about the laws that they could push down on us. Now we've got some really lovely people in Australia, and you know, one of those people who I know very well couldn't even go to a garage to get their car fixed unless they had a COVID passport. Now we never had that in Britain. We didn't. Yeah, okay, same in New Zealand. But I have my friend from Australia, so that's why I said Australia, not because I don't love New Zealand. So we have actually not had it as bad, that's my point here, as other countries. And we must remember that other countries really have had it incredibly difficult. So what are we waiting for? We're waiting for Biden to go, we're waiting for the Queen to go, we're waiting for Boris Johnson to go, we're waiting for all of the old-fashioned dinosaurs just to go. But we don't want it to be replaced by more of the same. No point in that. It's like, why would you vote Labour or Conservative or Liberal? Because all you're doing is changing the colour of the government. You're not changing the name of the people who run behind it. So, I promise you, and I mean this, we are not far away now. We're really not. And so we've held it together this long, just a little bit more. We're not going to talk about eating popcorn and holding the line. But we've got to hold it together. And for some of us, we do want people to say to us, oh, well, you were right. But for most of us, what we want to say is, okay, now you've discovered the truth, what are you going to do with it? What exactly are you going to do with it? Because we're going to move from a period of intel to a period of education and support. CC wants to influence government. Absolutely. What is the point in putting up a health centre or a medbed location if somebody from government turns up with a clipboard and says, well, you can't have that. You can't have that here. So in order to change the world, we have to change the way governments think. We have to support people so they see the truth, and we have to have the resources to put those facilities into locations that are needed. And CC, we hope, will play our role in that. Now, I'm going to go, ladies and gentlemen, because it's one more speaker, I think, and then food, and I don't want to be blamed for making you miss your food. Listen, I love all of you CC members, and I love all of you who are not, because you're here, because you made it. I've always said this, I'll finish off with this. People watch this at home on YouTube. Now, if you're in America, I appreciate it, very difficult to get here. But you guys have made the effort to come here. You've made it possible. It's so easy to sit at home and let someone else do the work. Watch on YouTube. But you've made the effort, you physically turned up here, you paid the ticket price. So the least things that we can do is perhaps have a Q&A with you later, so that at least you can do something that the internet watchers can't do. You can get the chance to ask the question. I hope I've made it entertaining. I know Charlie's going to finish it up tonight, and that will be where you get your Nasara, Jasara and your QFS stuff. But I just want to tell you that we've done 3/4 of the hard work. You're nearly there. So thank you so much. Love you all.